Well, a very warm welcome to episode 14 of My Body the Guitar with Karla Linn Merrifield. Great to see you, Karla.
Oh, great to see you, Paul. Here we are. 14. Woo!
And a really brilliant subject this week, which is
good old Jerry Garcia. This one, the poem actually tells the story of how how Jerry Garcia made it into my book, My Body the Guitar. So the poem kind of tells that story in a roundabout way. But I have never, ever been anything close to a deadhead in my life. And I knew that I had to have Jerry in the book. And how was I going to go about that? And what, and there are 3 or 4 songs that I know by them. I just was never a fan. I just didn't get get that message when I was, growing up. So anyway, so it took me a while to come up with, how am I going to approach this? And the one song that I probably know better of theirs than any other one is Truckin'. So Truckin' makes it into the poem as people will hear big time. And that became the connective tissue, okay, for the poem was the song Truckin'. And then I remembered how I heard that song and the poem tumbled out over 2 months.
So you were saying this is the longest, this took the longest of all the poems in the book so far?
Yes, easily 2 months, maybe a little longer of nothing but listening. 2 months of listening to the Grateful Dead, reading my wonderful, it's right here, biography of him. It's a monster, and trying to find and understand his magic. And it really, I was bowled over by his virtuosity and he could play anything. And did. In terms of, genres and subgenres, was there no punk and fusion stuff in there, but from bluegrass to rhythm and blues to, hardcore rock, folk, you name it, he could do it. And it seemed effortlessly. And then, I think, I'd like to play the banjo. And she picks up the banjo and becomes a really gifted banjo player.
Yeah.
He was astonishing. And I never recognized that. So it took a while for me to understand just the genius of Jerry Garcia, because I was alien to it, and I had to totally immerse. So I was bathing in Jerry Garcia vibes for like 2 months.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the poem, Karla. The title. How did you come up with the title?
Okay. Well, the poem is in 2 parts that reflect 2 very different contexts of when I heard the song Truckin'. And so the title brings it kind of together before you launch into the poem. You were there both times, Jerry. So there's this, the concept is both. So part 1 and part 2, and it's very autobiographical. So shall I do it?
Please do. Yeah. Great.
Maybe without blushing. We'll see. You were there both times, Jerry. I woke a virgin every morning. Many nights imagined the whole psychedelic shebang, the long, strange trips to be made, in my vagina, my soft machine. Did I go trucking off to Buffalo, or was it Albany where my maidenhood was first gifted to that doodah man? It was 70s res hall, quad suite, grunge, roommate, exile to the common area for a stoner night, obsessively dropping the same 45 down the spindle. Beyond the closed door, on a cot of jaunty squeak, I went full deadhead to feel what tomorrow brings. He didn't take it. I didn't lose it. My hymen busted down, if not on Bourbon Street. Boy, wake me in the morning with anything but Jerry Garcia. Part 2. For 3 years short of 50, no lights shining on me, I gave no thought to the Grateful Dead, listening only incidentally, snippets in traffic, snatches over the Crab Shack's PA, brief clips on a gas station's piped sat channel. But one night, he did take up the offering of my widow virginity as Alexa delivered shuffled time-traveled tracks. Bang! On a king bed, arrows of near and flashing marquees. Bingo! Holy banjo! After, he asked if Garcia would be included here. I obliged. Been thinking, you gotta mellow slow. Man, wake me up in the morning with anything, Jerry Garcia.
Beautiful. Well, that's a film right there, Karla. That is a film. That is such a brilliant. It brings to mind the amazing things that happen when we listen to music. Our music is the soundtrack for such a lot of everyone's lives. You know. So, could you tell us a bit about the background for the poem?
Well, because I'm not a Dead fan, and I mean, I probably could name 6 of their songs off the top of my head. And this is after those 2 months of just listening to Grateful Dead, and realizing, oh man, the American Beauty album, I think that's my favorite. But I knew it had to be Truckin', and then I kept, okay, how do I know that? How do I know Truckin'? I mean, I never saw them in concert. I never bought one of their records. Probably, I must have heard it somewhere on the radio back then when it came out, but I had no recollection. And that's part of the problem with getting to this poem is, when did I hear that song? And then, oh my God, I remember the first time I remember hearing it. And then I remembered years later, oh yeah, that came up on Alexa that night, So it was, associations. And like you say over and over again, the power of music to take us back to a moment in time.
Mm.
And in this instance, 2 moments separated by many, many years. But, so it was like this tenuous connection. Where do I find this connection to the Grateful Dead? And then, my memories after thinking about it, bubbled up, and I said, oh my God, I can see that residence hall suite. I could smell it almost.
Mm.
Lots of smoke to get out of the way, and then more vividly, because it's more recently, remembered, oh yeah, that's right. That was one of the tunes that, played that one night. So weird associations. I mean, this is what poets do. Things happen to us and we let them happen. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, Karla, with the structure of the poem, with anything but Jerry Garcia, and then with anything Jerry Garcia.
Yeah.
Was that a conscious? Well, of course, it was a conscious decision. How did you come around those tags at the end of the verses?
Well, I knew I needed to have something that repeated um, uh, within the two pieces to bring a little more unity to the poem. And in a sonnet, and albeit this is a modern sonnet, so it doesn't have all the elaborate rules of rhyme scheme. The two most important lines are the last lines, the final couplet, in the traditional sense. And so I knew that I had to use those lines wisely. And the difference in the two lines, boy, there's a couple differences. Boy, wake me in the morning with anything but Jerry Garcia. And then man, wake me up in the morning with anything Jerry Garcia. It's the difference between I was kind of underscore a little bit the difference between the two time periods in the poem. A boy versus man, that first sexual encounter, and having to listen to trucking all night long.
Yeah.
I'd had enough of it. And that first time is kind of icky anyway, in a lot of ways. And then by the time, almost 50 years later, it was like, yeah, Jerry Garcia, this is the way it happens, so just, one of those curiosities of how to make the power of the closing couplet work, and parallel the two situations and the different points in life from boy to, from a boy experience to an experience with a man.
Yeah.
A lot of time, life lived in between. So
at least you got the Grateful Dead, Karla. I think my first time she put on Chopin's Minute Waltz.
Excuse me.
Yeah. But getting back to the poem, so I do apologise. It's quite small on my phone. What you sent me was great.
Okay.
But also the locations. Did I go trucking off to Buffalo, or was it Albany?
Yeah.
And is this really kind of autobiographical of the time you were actually in those areas?
Yes, I was. Yes, I was living in New York State. Of course, and the whole poem has. That's another part of the unity. Has lines from the truckin' song. Has lyric lines that I've borrowed and incorporated. God, had to get him trucking off to Buffalo because, when I was in college, the era of this particular, stanza, Jesus, was that Buffalo I went and spent the weekend, or was it Albany, the capital of New York State? And it was just kind of fun, trying to think back, okay, which one was it? And it was just fun to think, as I went back in my, deep, dark college years, which state university was it? Buffalo or Albany?
It's an interesting thing that's occurred to me, Karla, is possibly this, and maybe the Jackson Browne are probably. Would you say that they're very personal poems?
Yeah.
To you?
Oh, yeah.
And
very. There are a few like this. None as overtly, I think, autobiographical. And part of it is I didn't know where to go with Jerry Garcia. And where I went was where he came into my life on a very personal way. That's how I celebrated his genius was, oh my God, he was there.
It is so interesting with this. I think the Grateful Dead also, I'm not a massive fan myself. I respect them enormously. I think they've done incredible things. They're really, I know in the 70s they really pushed live audio PA systems forward. They had their own PA system, which was like the state of the art, and it's a real it's a real community with the Grateful Dead as well, isn't it? Deadheads.
Yeah. It still exists today. There are there are Deadhead clubs. You could, Deadhead gear, hats, t-shirts, mugs, the whole shooting match. And then from what I understand in snooping around the internet was there are Dead, what do they call cover bands?
Yeah.
And so remaining Deadheads can go, follow these, cover bands that have, filled in a huge gap. Once Jerry died, that was really it for the Grateful Dead.
Yeah. But I think that they gave
30 years. 30
how many
years.
They were together for 40 years.
30, yeah.
30.
30 years.
It's one of the aspects also of it's really interesting that of the subjects you pick, because a lot of the Grateful Dead's music is about improvisation. They're kind of the original in rock terms, the jam band, really.
Yes.
Where they were just, in fact, I was in a cafe in Brooklyn when we were on the Queen Mary 2, and I thought this was like jazz fusion stuff. I thought, wow, this is brilliant. What's this? And then I asked the woman behind the counter. She said, "Oh, it's the Grateful Dead's live album." And it's like, and then there's such as you say, a variety of brilliant music from, and not afraid to just, again, maybe like Bonnie Raitt, I would say the Grateful Dead were a genre by themselves.
I think I have to agree. There's just no, on so many levels. Just okay, lasting 30 years is its own, and no band has ever had this kind of fan base. People just used to go from coast to coast doing nothing but following all the concerts. And they were really, that's part of what wore Jerry Garcia out, and turned him in a way towards more and more drugs that got him into such trouble. The schedule that they kept was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole Deadhead thing, that's never happened with, everybody has, greats have their fans, but nothing on this scale. And people would just, they would, have little portable in their car economies where they would set up shop in order to earn a few bucks selling donuts or headbands or psychedelic t-shirts or whatever, and then make their way to the next concert all the way across the country and back. It was a scene that has never happened before, and I doubt would happen again. Because the nature of the music business has changed. I may want to go to every Jackson Browne concert there is, but whoa, there's lots of money involved, and how do I work that into my schedule? These people just gave their lives. Thousands upon thousands of people just gave, oh man, the Dead's on tour. Here I go.
Amazing.
And went off on these incredible journeys following them from place to place. It's just astounding. Blows my mind. And Jerry would love that. Yeah, blow your mind.
I think that one of the things that attracts people to the Grateful Dead is the fact that they invest very heavily in their fans, in terms of that PA system cost a fortune to build.
Yeah.
And also they were encouraging people to trade live cassettes of the bootlegs of their shows.
Right. And there's hundreds of them.
Oh, practically everything.
Hundreds of those bootlegs. And they're still being circulated. It's just, modern music has never seen anything like it.
I think so. And I think a lot of their music is totally created in the moment, which I think is another attraction to the fact that you're hearing they're not manufacturing a performance. You're hearing a moment in time, and there's a big difference between, between that. So if a song goes on for another 10 minutes or another 20 minutes, it means that they're kind of just seeing where it's going. And I think people want to buy into that creativity, because it's like you're seeing something. Well, you're seeing something improvised in the moment that will never be repeated, because it'll always be different. by its definition.
And they loved doing that, and they were very cognizant of their relationship with the audience. I mean, part of it just reflected in ticket prices. I mean, they really, I mean, they lost the tons of money. The amplifier system, the wall of sound that they built. I mean, the cost of that, and then the cost of having to move it from venue to venue to venue. They just almost went bankrupt with the wall of sound because it took, you know, besides their touring, you know, bus and the roadie bus, they had a semi full of sound equipment following them around for a couple years with that wall of sound until it got, you know, they were almost bankrupt. And they had to, you know, back off from that. But whoa, and they just were trying to deliver each time a unique experience to their legions.
I think so. I think plus the fact if people are following them on tour, they don't really want to see the same show every night. And with the Grateful Dead, you'd never get that, which is fantastic. And I think in terms of when you were planning this poem, Karla, did you plan to have two separate parts all along?
I think so. Once I hit on the idea of where memory dredged up those two scenarios, I said, okay, it's a two-part poem. What's it going to be? And I thought, well, a modern sonnet's pretty easy. Let me use that as a way of, I mean, when you've got the Grateful Dead and you've got 30 years of a musician's life, how do you contain that? I mean, it could have been another book as thick as this autobiography. And I said, no, you've got, you know, I said to myself, you've got to constrain it somehow. And I figured, okay, 14 lines with a really strong closing couplet in those 14 lines, and make the two pieces equal. So it was more good management of the situation to choose the modern sonnet, to try and contain that sprawling career and his sprawling life as a musician in terms of the different instruments, the different genres he played. I mean, he was always off. He never stopped playing. I mean, the Grateful Dead was huge, but he had the Jerry Garcia band. He had several other bands that he would just hop down from San Francisco to LA just to play a few gigs with them, go back. I mean, he was constantly performing.
I think it showed in the music because they always wanted to be fresh. And I think when you look at the influence of Grateful Dead, I mean, when you look at bands like the Allman Brothers, Lynyrd Skynyrd, a lot of the jam bands, Fish, they opened a massive door for rock musicians to almost play in a jazz context where they would just stretch it out. And I think Hendrix. I mean, and when you think of the contemporaries of the Grateful Dead, I mean, they were mid-60s. I think they were formed. Actually, I should have looked it up.
Yes.
Is it mid-60s? So I mean,
yes, 65, I believe. Yeah, 65 to 95.
Wow. I mean, so that's an enormous amount of influence. I mean, bands today like Government Mule from offshoot of the Allman Brothers. You know, the Dead really are. They're so influential, not only in the music, but also the fact that they built that wall of sound. The modern concert systems that we see today in arenas are kind of that idea.
Yeah.
It's called line ray, so they really pushed it. And of course, he had a beautiful custom guitar made, and Phil Lesh, isn't it? And there's so many great. Oh yeah.
Here's one of Jerry's custom Doug Irwin guitars, and here he is. Here he is playing it. And he spent his whole career playing these custom Doug Irwin guitars, which I had never encountered before. So that was kind of just a little interesting side journey. Okay, what are these guitars? But that was his axe, and
it's a very specific sound he has as well, because he doesn't get mentioned that much when people talk about guitar players. They don't really mention Jerry Garcia very much, but as you say, he could play all banjo, rock, jazz, folk,
steel pedal guitar. I mean, I don't think he ever. I didn't run across it, but I don't think he ever picked up a mandolin. But he played with, whose name I can't recall now, a great mandolin player. Shame on me. And they would go on for hours and hours just together hanging out. So, but put anything else in his hands and and shake. I mean, the reggae. I mean, he could do anything.
Yeah, and I think
and did it.
It's a really good point that you make there, Karla, because the reason he could do pretty much anything is because he practiced a lot. That's the thing, is that it doesn't. People often say, "Oh, he's such a natural talent." Well, yeah,
no.
But I mean, you've got. There's a lot of work in. People say about Hendrix, "Oh, he was so naturally gifted." Well, yeah, he was, but he spent a lot of time sat behind the guitar. In terms of this, when you spend 2 months on a poem, Karla, has this been the longest time you've spent writing a poem?
It's certainly the longest time I spent on any poem in My Body, the Guitar book. There have probably been a couple others in my life, over my poetic career that took this long or longer. I remember years ago writing a lay, which is a French form that it's gone way out of style now, but it's still like 1500s goes back to. Anyway, I remember writing only one of those. And that took quite a while, but yeah, this one was just, it took, I mean, the actual writing of it was probably, once I put lines were going through my head. I was trying to find the approach. It was a long time coming,
So,
but I was happy, it was worth it. But
for people that are thinking to get into poetry, I've not asked you this actually. I would like to. What advice would you give to people with a blank page in front of them, thinking, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?"
Just put the pen down on the page and start writing whatever comes to your mind. A lot of teachers, poetry writing teachers, workshops, that kind of thing, will do an exercise called free writing. And basically what you do is you sit with your pen and paper, or your keyboard, I guess, and just for 10 minutes, write. Don't censor yourself. Don't stop. Just write. Write. And you get like 3 pages or 2 pages of a lot of nonsense. But in that nonsense, you may find, you usually do, find a phrase or a line or an idea, because you freed your mind to not judge, just write whatever comes into your head. And somewhere in there is usually a germ of what will become a poem. And I've done it dozens of times. That's really kind of keeping my journal as a form of free writing, although I'm reporting on what's going on in my life and pondering deep issues or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's all. It really is that simple. Put down the pad, or the journal or the notebook, pick your pen up and go, and don't judge yourself. Just write. It may sound like gibberish when you're done, but somewhere in that gibberish, there will be something that pops out. I used to do it when I was teaching freshman composition at the state college where I had retired and went back to teach, because I thought it was important that students learn to write, and they have to take the damn course anyway. I mean, one of the things I would do with it, I got to write an essay about this, and and what we would have 5-minute free writing exercises, and I would pick a few, and and there's no judgment, and I would say, I would read it out loud or have the student read it out loud, and I would make notes on the black, and I would find the lines in their paragraphs that they had just scribbled, the magic, and they would go, oh yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's just, that's what you got to do. You got to put a pen to paper or your fingers on the keyboard and let it rip. Somewhere in that, the freedom, the permission that you give yourself to do that, things bubble up out of the subconscious, and it's there. And from there, maybe you can write a poem about a pea in a pod, or your grandmother's chicken soup, or whatever it turns out to be. You know?
When you do these poems, Karla, I just thought of the I've never asked you this question. Was there another poet that influenced you to with the style of the writing of this book?
Oh, well, they come from all over. Certainly, I think most American poets cannot deny Walt Whitman, his big place in our literary history and our heritage, because Walt Whitman, I mean, there was nobody ever like him, a massive influence on American literature. And he gave himself permission to write what he wanted to write and reflect the subject matter that interested him. And he really is America's poet. He saw all walks of life and recognized them and gave them a place in his poetry, whether it's the stevedore down at the docks, or the newspaper boy on the dropping the newspapers off on the front stoop. I mean, all kinds of things. He was, so I think of, we call him Saint Walt. And we have bumpers, poets over here have bumper stickers. What would Walt do? I mean, it's not just cult. It's really imbued into, if you know anything about American literature, they make you stop and read a little bit, and that impact on us. So yeah, so Walt Whitman definitely, and I think for this book, perhaps even as on the same level of influence is listening to lyrics. I listen to music differently now. I mean, it's not just learning to play the guitar. I mean, I really sit and listen to, I'll be driving, but I'll, line in a lyric will catch, and I think about how that song was constructed lyrically. How did those words happen? Why is this repeated? Analyzing, picking it apart. So I think, I've been under the influence of some incredible, not just guitarists in the music, but the lyrics that they were playing along with. So yeah, a lot of lyrics.
I find it an interesting parallel between Jerry Garcia or someone like Tom Waits, where the music kind of opens them up creatively to paint some absolutely beautiful pictures. I mean, trucking. I mean, it's a great song, isn't it? And I mean, there's no doubt how that was written.
Right.
Right. They'd have been going across the driving everywhere and stuff like that. And it's really interesting the kind of resonance that hits with people, because there are driving songs, aren't there? People
Yeah.
in the History of the Eagles DVD, Glenn Fry says, when you listen to the Eagles, you're always doing something. You're driving, you're working in the garage or whatever. You're doing something, and I think this really really personal poem. It's fascinating that by thinking about Jerry Garcia's and the Grateful Dead's music, that it took you to a very personal place to then bring that out. Really, I think it's really it's a fascinating process. That was there anything that you left out of this poem that you thought?
Oh, oh God, I have pages and pages and pages that of drafts. Um, I don't, I didn't, I don't think I think I knew exactly the essence of what, where I wanted to be in the poem. I spent quite a bit of time early on analyzing the lyrics to Truckin'. Where's the magic in the lyrics?
Mm.
And I printed them off from online, and I circled things, and there's a great line like, what the heck is a doodah man? And it was like, ooh, there's a great phrase. I'm going to borrow that one. And I started identifying the lines that I wanted to use. I mean, I had to get in Long Strange Trip, because that's the refrain in the song. And that's why that's the first lyric that's quoted in the poem. But I mean, the song, just the lyrics to that song amazed me. Because they do take you all over. Yes, you're in Buffalo in one stanza, and then you're on Bourbon Street in New Orleans in another. Of course, they were on tour, and somehow Jerry and Bob Hunter, who wrote so many great songs together, came up with this. And so there's a bit of Americana in it too. I mean, the arrows of near and flashing marquees, that's another line from Truckin'. And you can just imagine them, driving down, downtown Pittsburgh or Cleveland or Chicago or Denver, and seeing the flashing marquees in the cities that they were rumbling through tour date to tour date. So that was a very much helped shape the poem itself, was which lines do I want to borrow from Truckin'. And there's probably a half a dozen that I did that help, that's part of the coloring in the poem, where those lines slip in, and the deadheads who read it will go, yeah, right, oh brother.
I think it's really interesting with song lyrics like that. I mean, when that we written late 60s, wouldn't it? Truckin', I think, is that a late 60s?
Yes,
late 60s. So he wrote that in the late 60s, and it's interesting. I mean, the lyrics are the lyrics, so the lyrics don't change, but people's perception of a song change over the period of the lifetime. That's what really is a fascinating subject, because the lyrics don't change, but the perception and people's experiences are molded around that type of song. How many people, I mean, we talked about this before, that, when people listen to music, the body, 60% water, and the body reacts. There's a chemical reaction to music in the body for certain. That's why people hear a song and weep, or they jump up and down, or it can bring total strangers bonded together for 3 minutes, totally. And it's the power of the word, isn't it? That the words don't change, but our perception of the words. Shakespeare is probably a great example.
Yeah, look how eternal Shakespeare has proven to be, and how many interpretations there have been through time of, when a different director produces Macbeth or something, how differently they might express what the same essential play that was written. Those words are locked in time, but they may be cast differently into. I mean, I saw a production of The Merchant of Venice that was set in 1930s Austria. I mean, it was, or Italy. Yeah, excuse me, Italy. And it was brown shirt time, and the rise of Mussolini was the context. But yet we're dealing with The Merchant of Venice, which is, a very old, back to the early 1600s. So, you're right about the lyrics. I mean, I guess there's some LSD still coming down in this country. I don't know. I was not part of that scene, but boy, the Grateful Dead were, and their Deadheads were, and that was part of the whole Deadhead and Grateful Dead gestalt was, Timothy Leary and Ken Kesey and the Magic Bus, and blowing all this LSD all the time, and that's what the people did who went to the concerts in those early 60s and 70s. So that doesn't change, but the lyrics still mean something to us. We may not be on those psychedelic trips, but we have our own versions of that we translate it to. Had too much wine last night or something.
I was going to ask you, Karla, so for generally for a lot of people, the words do change. The meaning of the words kind of change over. But when you look back at your work, when you look back at this poem after you've finished writing it, do you see things sometimes differently after you've written it? Do you think, oh, okay? Do you see something new in it sometimes?
I do. In fact, last night I was reading it aloud a couple times, just to get the line rhythms in, and the punctuation. Where do I put the emphasis? Rehearsing. Okay, and I stopped. I said, "Wait a minute! No, I don't want that line to end with a period. I want it to be a colon that leads into the next line." So I actually made, and I added a stanza break. I made a stanza break in the second half. So yeah, you're all. I mean, a poet can noodle. A poet can, excuse me, noodle their poems forever. And every time if I go back to this, I might find something else. Who was it? Valéry, the French poet Valéry, said, "We don't finish our poems, we abandon them." Because you can always do something. You can always tweak it a little more, push it a little more, push it a little more. And sometimes you do that and you end up with something totally different than where you started. So you may have two poems.
I totally know what you mean. I've been mixing this one song for this whole week, and I'm thinking, I need this, and sometimes you just get a bit close to it. That's what I did. I was like, everything was like, oh my god, no, but sometimes I think it's nice to adopt a more jazzier approach when it's a moment in time, rather than chiseling away at the statue of David. You kind of just go, well, that's it. That's what we got. And it's kind of interest. And so this is the longest poem this is the longest period of time. What was the shortest poem so far that you've, in terms of time, for composition?
The first poem in the book, the intro poem that stands all by itself, is called Gentle Weep. And it's probably 10 or 12 very short lines. I wrote that in the middle of practicing the guitar.
Oh, wow.
It was the very first month I was playing. And I always keep note paper handy. And I was an absolute beginner starting to play and thinking about my fingers developing their calluses, and I just stopped. And I took my pen and my little notebook and bingo, probably 2 minutes. And it's one of the most beautiful poems I've ever written, in my humble opinion. And it's the first poem in the book. So it's really important in terms of where this is where the reader starts. Where is it going to take me? And I sold that one, placed it with a journal very early on. So that was one of the shorter ones. Every once in a while, they just come, and you never know. There's several that I don't know where they came from. They were just there, and it's like I'm just channeling some spirit.
Yeah.
And the spirit says, okay, Karla, right. And it comes from somewhere else.
It's such an interesting process, that, because I think sometimes it's almost like a cleanse, because sometimes
Yes.
early morning can be a great time to write, isn't it? Before anything happens, early morning, before any media goes on,
Yes.
anything comes on. It's like it's such a valuable time for anyone writing. I think it's such a valuable time to know when the best time to write is. And it's when, unless something inspires something on the TV or the radio, it's like, it's best not to have anything and just let things happen.
Yeah.
In fact,
I love those morning poems. Sometimes I wake up and I'm just kind of coming to, and there's a line, and then there's another line. And, I quick get up, grab a cup of coffee, sit down, and just let it happen.
I think it's wonderful. I mean, I've been studying Indian classical music recently again, quite a lot. And they've got like music for morning, music for afternoon, music for evening, and it's kind of, a lot of that's based on improvisation. In Indian classical music, there's nothing written down. It's an oral tradition. Well, people write stuff down now, but I mean, 500 years of oral tradition, basically.
Right.
So, and it's really interesting because the creative process is such a mystery, really, because no one can kind of say, "Oh, this is what you do." But I think it's really interesting how different people try to capture something. Unless they can invent a USB that just goes in the side of your head, and all your thoughts go for the day go in there, and then you put them there. That was what I was looking for. I think it's really interesting how you try to capture the moment, because that's what it is, isn't it? You're trying to catch that, just channel something that's just going to come through.
Yeah. And you just got to be there. I mean, that to me is my bottom line. You asked a few minutes ago about, what do you tell poets who want to get started or think they want to write a poem? The bottom line is just show up. If you put yourself in the moment and you've got your pen, and what is it? It happens, but you have to show up.
Yeah.
I mean, I get into some arguments with fellow poets who, writer's block. And I'm like, I'm sorry, dudes, there isn't anything such as writer's block. You can pick up a pen anytime you damn well want. Now pick it up and do it. I mean, I get, like I said, I've gotten into arguments about this. I just can't believe there is no such thing as writer's block, because you could always put a pen on paper, and it may be garbage, whatever it is you write. But out of that garbage, they throw that away and keep going.
Yeah,
anyway.
I think it's a very interesting point that I think we're about that is that, as we said before, everything's progress. Because even if I've written songs where I think, oh God, that's awful, but then it leads you somewhere else, and I think it's following the path, isn't it? I think following the path to where where to progress, because no one's ever written something that couldn't be, that is kind of perfect, as because perfection can't exist. I don't think in art. I mean, it's and plus the fact it's all subjective anyway,
Yes, it is.
And I think that with this I just love the way that you've used the Grateful Dead's Jerry Garcia to tell a very personal story in a very kind of open and very cinematic way. I think it's beautiful, Karla.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's
I
brilliant.
mean, we all have these songs that take us back somewhere. And I let the song take the lead. It was like dancing. The
Mm.
song took the lead and I followed. And this is where it led. I was like, whoa, yeah.
It's amazing. I just think, but before I just think it will be really interesting. A song like Trucking, if you take this, I mean, this probably sat round and wrote it, fairly quickly, I would think. But when you look at the amount of strands that come from that song, that in people's lives, it would be, if you had the song there, and all the strands came off of all the
Oh, yeah.
experiences, all the influences, it would be
That's an
enormous,
interesting idea.
enormous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just with this, with any song or any piece of art. When you look at what comes from it, then you really, I mean, it's an incredible subject. I think that we'd love to discuss more, because sometime, because the trucking, is part of your life. It's part of so many different people's lives in so many different ways, and it's what, a 4 minute song.
Yeah, about that.
Four
Yeah.
minute song,
Yeah.
and I think it's fascinating that not to analyze it too much, because then the kind of the fun goes out of it, but the fact that of this song is part of millions of people's lives and experiences,
Yeah.
and then of course you hear the song and it triggers in your mind, as you said, you could smell the room, you could see
Yes.
everything
Yes. Yes. It was like
from.
I could smell that dorm suite, and it was that real. I was like, oh God, that was disgusting. How did we ever, but that, college kids, that's how you lived.
But it's so interesting. Even if you didn't, I mean, if you took a song like "Dancing in the Streets," which starts with a drum fill, da, 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 and it's like, from that one drum fill, somebody would recognize it, and then all of a sudden, the whole film starts in their head, just from that kind of, I forgot that, it's like firing a starting gun, and the whole
Yes, it
thing,
is a
when I think
trigger.
trigger, exactly. When I think of Dancing in the Streets, all of a sudden, I mean, I don't dance, but it's like there's so many scenarios in my head come up, and it's like, it's really interesting how it triggers off all those sensations. It's amazing, really brilliant. This is
Yeah.
a fantastic poem, Cara, as ever. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like,
Well,
you'd like to add?
no, I just hope that Jerry Garcia in the Great Beyond um, gives me a good nod.
Well, it's going to be a hell of a house band wherever he is. Oh my God, yeah. But thank you so much, Karla. As ever, it's been an absolute pleasure to explore the beautiful works that you produce. It's fabulous, and we look forward
Thank
to the
you,
next
Paul.
one.
This is such a blast. I have so much fun with you.
Oh, we have great.
I hope that our viewers enjoy it as well. It's such a unusual combination of things, I think, and it's like, what, talk about a trip.
Well, thanks again, Karla. We look
All
forward to the
right.
next one. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.